been in previous presentations. Cruz has been involved in the majority of them. Agricultural specialist with the UTRGV Beginning Farmer and Rancher Project. He's been with UTRGV since 2012, back when we were UTPA. And he works with small scale producers with specialty crop production. He's a specialist in building high tunnels, building structures for season extension, grape grafting, drip irrigation, a number of different topics he's a specialist in. He also owns and manages Salinas Family Farm, where they specialize in tomato, strawberry, and asparagus production, among other things. And previously, Cruz, he was a farm worker until the age of 17, worked for 30 years in the ag equipment industry here in the Rio Grande Valley, and he worked for 7 years for the USDA Kika de la Garza Research Center on crop, especially crop research projects. And Cruz is going to present today. It's a follow-up from last week, where he talked about growing dragon fruit and what's involved with that. Today he's going to talk about building those concrete posts to actually support the very heavy dragon fruit plant. So Cruz, please go ahead and take it over, sir.
Thank you, Colin. I've been growing dragon fruit, also known as pitaya, for about 7 years now. It's been an experience. I've tried several different methods of actually trellising the dragon fruit. And after several trials, I decided that using the concrete post was the best thing for me, especially that because I was going to go commercially. The steps in building the concrete post is kind of a little complicated, but it's really simple. Once you do one, everything else is monotonous. You just keep doing it over and over. We'll go ahead and start with a presentation because there's quite a few slides. First of all, we'll start with the tools required for building the concrete post. First, you'll need a trough. Then you'll need a hoe to mix the concrete. You'll need a shovel to shovel your mix into your form. You'll need a drill for drilling the screws to put the boards together. You're going to need a 7/16 wood bit. You'll need a hammer, some wire cutters, measuring tape, and a container to fill the mix with water. I use this container that's already marked with a gallon, so I can get pretty accurate as far as the water quantity that I'm going to be using. The materials needed to make the form, and the reason I made this form is, like I said, I wanted to make about 40 or 50 of these concrete posts, so I went ahead and made the expense of buying the materials. And actually there's 3 sets of materials that I use because I was building three posts at the same time. The materials required are 2 2x4 by 7 foot boards. You're going to need 1 2x8 by 7 foot. You'll need 2 short pieces. You'll need some rebar. The rebar is actually, in this case that I used, 3/8 by 8 feet. You're going to be needing the screws to attach the boards all together. And you'll be needing some wire, 1 roll of wire to brace the rebar. You'll also be needing, of course, your concrete mix. In this particular picture, I might make a note that I did use high strength concrete Quikrete, but I strongly recommend that you use the Maximizer concrete mix. You have different PSIs of concrete mix that actually measures the strength of the concrete when it dries up, and the higher the PSI, the better it holds together. In this particular case, when I was making this presentation, they happen to be sold out of the Maximizer concrete. So we'll be using this high strength concrete mix for the demonstration. First step that we're going to start doing is you're going to start attaching or putting or drilling the screws into your boards. In this case, we have the screws pre-drilled into your 2x8 board. The screws are spaced evenly, and they don't have to be actually measured. They can just be more or less 2 feet apart. It's just to hold all these pieces together. I'll be using 10x3 screws because there is quite a bit of weight involved in putting these in this form together. The next step that you're going to do is you're going to lay out your 2x4s and by 3.5, and your top board, your 2x4x8 in this manner. You'll be laying the 2x4s on a vertical position, and you'll be laying the 2x8 in a horizontal position. Okay, the spacing is going to be 7.5, and I might make a note that even though that we say, or you go by a 2x4x8 or in this case a 2x8, they're not actually 4 inches in diameter. They're only 3.5. And this board is not a true 8. It's 7.25, I believe. So basically this 2x8 is going to be on the outer edges, and that goes for all your lumber. Even though it says 2x4, it's not actually 4 inches wide. The next step that when you're about to put your screws into your 2x4x8s, you want to make absolutely positively sure that your boards are flush on the outside. This will give you a true measurement on the inside. The next thing that you want to do is on both ends, your front and your back, just mark it by using your 2x4 piece by 7.5. and using that as a guide, and that's how far that this 2x4x7 is going to extend on both ends. Once you get it all lined up and in place, go ahead and screw your 2x4s onto your 2x8. And just flip the mold over. Okay, this is what it should look like when it's all put together. Once you have that put together, you're going to get your 2x4x7.25, and you're going to mark a triangle in the center of your 2x4x7.25, and you're going to come down 1 inch from both ends, and you're going to, on just one board, in this case I had two because I had 2 molds that I was making, you're going to drill out with your wood bit your 7/16 holes for 1 end. So in this case, the one that is drilled out is going to be your front end where your rebar is going to go through, and this is going to be your back end. Once you get those drilled out, then you're going to install your front drilled out 2x4x7 with 2 wood screws on one end, and you're going to screw the other one on the back end. The next step that you're going to do is you're going to install your rebar. your rebar is a foot longer than your actual mold. So your rebar is going to stick out 12 inches from the front end. Something that I did, and I'll make a note, that when I drilled out these two, I went ahead and it made it easier for me to hang the rebar on your back end in place. So I took off the one that had no holes and I installed the one that did have holes. So both front and back, they did have the holes drilled out. And basically this was just to hold your rebar in place. The next thing that you have to do, and this is kind of tedious and it has to be almost perfect because this is what's going to strengthen your concrete post. What you're going to do is you're going to get just a piece of your rebar and you're going to lay it across the top. You're going to take your wire and you're going to cut maybe some 12-inch pieces. And basically what you want to do is on the both, since this is like a triangle, the ones that are on the bottom, you're going to want to lift them up an inch off the top of your bottom 2x4x8. Okay, so the right and left bottom ones are up in the air 1 inch away from the board, and your center one, which would be the top one, you want it 1 inch from the top coming down. So basically this triangle is going to be the same height as this triangle here, as your both ends. And in this case, I believe I just did it with one, but I would recommend that you do it at least in 2 places. Once you have everything in place, we're ready to start mixing the concrete. As I mentioned earlier, in this case, I did put one, but you might make it a little bit stronger by maybe putting maybe 2. It just strengthens the concrete post a little bit more. When you start the mixing of the concrete, make sure you have all your stuff ready. Everything is prepared. Everything is close by. Because once you start mixing the concrete, you only have X amount of time before your concrete starts to set. Okay? Where if you've never mixed concrete before, it's pretty simple. It's not very difficult to do. In this case, I'm using a trough. You could use a wheelbarrow. You can make your own trough out of lumber or whatever. But I mean, these are not very expensive to purchase. You're going to need your trough. You're going to mix in 1 50-pound bag of the concrete mix. Have your hose so you can mix your concrete mix with the water, and have your shovel ready so that you can put the concrete mix into your form. The first mix is going to be 50 pounds of concrete, and you're going to use 1.5 gallons of water. Now this is for this 50-pound bag. Normally I would be using an 80-pound bag, but like I said, they didn't have it. If as far as weight is concerned, if 50 pounds is too much or 80 pounds is too much, they do sell it in a 25-pound bag. So you just have to adjust your water according to the weight of the concrete mix that you are using. Once you have your mix in your trough, then you add your water. And I pour all the water in at one time. I mean, I've done this long enough to where I know exactly how much water it takes. So I just pour it in and I just start mixing it up back and forth, a little bit at a time. I'll bring the hoe to this point and bring some of the dry mix into the center, and I'll walk to the other side, and then I'll bring some of this mix uh, and mix it thoroughly till you have a consistency of not too watery and then not too dry. Um, the consistency that I like is almost, I mean, not quite like a soup, but something that I can be able to handle and move without it sticking to. You can see how it's sticking right here. It still needs to be mixed up just a little bit more. Once you have your mix ready, then you're going to start applying it into the trough. Here's where I mentioned a little bit earlier, where now you need to start working really fast. I mean, this is probably, I mean, I did it by myself without any problem. If there's a two-man team, that makes it a lot better, and you can go a lot quicker. Because once you're at this point, then your concrete is going to start to set. So now you've got to move quickly in putting your mix into your mold. Once you have filled or used your 50-pound mix on one side, then you move quickly to mix another batch, and you go ahead and you fill your other side. One tip that I do have for y'all, when you all have this mold filled with the concrete, is grab it from this portion right here, lift it up anywhere from 4 to 6 inches, and just let it drop about 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row. And what that does is it takes out all your air pockets out of your concrete, and it fills in all the spaces that didn't get any mix at all. Then you go to the opposite end and you do the same thing. After you do that, you can get your shovel and scrape all the excess from on top, from both sides. And at this point, just to make it a little bit prettier, go ahead and lift it up a couple of times and drop it. And you can see where all the rocks just settle in, and it makes it real nice and smooth, and it removes the rest of the air pockets. And once you've done, basically this is what you're going to have. You're going to have your cement concrete post ready. At this point, that's how it's made comment there. You're going to let it sit like this for at least 4 days in the mold. By the 4th or 5th day, your concrete is going to start to set. It will look hard, and at this point, you can start removing your mold sides from the front and back and both sides by taking it apart. Here's where you'll need your hammer sometimes to pull this out. Remember, you had your wires that were holding up your rebars. You'll cut those with your wire cutters. You'll turn the mold over, and then you start removing your wood screws from your sides on your 2x4s by 7s. At this point, your mold should be nice, and it's not going to be very hard. It's still not cured yet. Uh, but at this point, you're able to pick it up, move it around, slide it over. And one of the things that I did is when I would take the mold out, I would put the mold where I was going to leave it. I did not want to be moving this around so that it wouldn't crack on me or stuff like that. So basically what I did is when I took this mold off, I would leave the post in that position for at least 4 weeks before I actually started working with it and putting in the ground. That way, the concrete gets really hard, and you're able to work with it, and you're not going to crack it, and you're not going to break it. Now, the width and the length of this one is actually 3.5 because it was a 2x4, but the actual width is 4 inches. And the bag, it tells you, it gives you a little calculation on how long your mold is going to take to actually cure to its fullest. And in this case, this post, this particular diameters was going to take 3 months. So basically what I did is I took the posts after 4 weeks and I set them in the holes, and I left them there before I actually planted or started working the rebars on top and bending them so that I would not break or crack the top end of the wooden post, or the concrete post, that is. And here's your final work, your concrete post with the rebars folded over with your tire on top and your dragon fruit growing out of your concrete post. The reason I also chose concrete, I might add, is that this dragon fruit takes quite a bit of water. Even though it's in the cactus family, it takes about 1 inch of water a week or every 2 weeks. And if you were using a wooden post or a PVC or a treated post, it will eventually rot. And if you're using a PVC pipe, the PVC pipe is not strong enough to withstand the weight of the dragon fruit. The dragon fruit will eventually umbrella out, and it'll weigh, the mass will be almost, I mean, it can be up to 100 to 150, 200 pounds, and that's why I use the concrete post. At this point, if we have any questions, Colin?
Yeah, we do have some questions. Cruz, that was fantastic. Just as a reminder, because again, so your presentation was a follow-up to last week's, where you talked more about the plant, more about the fruit, and using I think wooden trellises you were talking about last week. So why are concrete trellises so important? I think this relates to how big these plants grow, right? And like how sort of, you know, like how much support they can need over time.
I guess the main reason is because the plant actually will grow up to about 20, 25 years if you take care of it. And even though a cedar post or a treated lumber is designed, you know, to withstand the weather and the water from rotting, it will not last, you know, more than 7 years to 10 years. And at that point, that's when your dragon fruit is in full production, and you're probably going to have to replace, or the post is going to break or something like that. So, you know, the best thing to do is go with a concrete post.
Right. So we have a question here from UTRGV's own Robin Chowdhury. Could you use T-posts instead of using concrete, these concrete posts?
There is actually no right way and no wrong way, or no right trellis or wrong trellis. I have played with different types of trellises. I've used T-posts. I've used T-posts with a King Ranch wire, which is the one they use for cattle. We've used cattle panels, the 6x6 trellis. I do have a fence in the backyard that, you know, I've thrown some pitaya there where and just let it grow. I mean, it literally grows anywhere. But if you're going to go commercially, this would be probably the route to go.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And following up on that, so we had comments, I think, from last week, and a follow-up question. When you leave the newly made concrete posts in place for a month after you unmold them, do you cover them with anything? Are you using a tarp? Do they need to be protected from water or rain or wind or anything?
No, actually, I just let them set and I let them dry out. They're where they were. So it's now, you don't want to set them out in the sun and leave them out in the sun at the beginning. If you're doing it right in the middle of the summer, it's almost like a concrete slab. You know, you don't want it to dry real fast. So at that point, you would probably, you know, get a garden hose or a bucket and maybe pour some water over it so that, you know, it dries slowly.
Again, from Robin, he's asking, he thinks he missed it, but how are you securing the posts once you build them, once they're dried out and cured a little bit? How are you securing them to the ground? I know that there's a bunch of rebar sticking out. You're digging a hole and just like a post hole digger, or how are you approaching that?
It's just a regular post. Dig the 2-foot hole and just drop it in the 2-foot hole. Now I'm using in my prior presentation, I used a tire which was 10 inches deep with more topsoil. So if you're planting straight flush on the ground, then I'd strongly recommend that your hole be, you know, a little bit deeper because it is holding a lot of weight. Now the length or the height of the pole is also not, you know, set in stone. I mean, the reason that I chose 7 foot is that I'm able to harvest the dragon fruit. I'm 6'1", so I'm able to harvest the fruit without using ladders. Now, if you want to go taller, of course, your plant's going to be much taller. I mean, it's going to produce the leaves much longer, but now you're having to use ladders to harvest the fruit. Now, if you're using or you're going to be growing a minimal amount of plants, maybe that'd be the route to go, you know, to have a taller trellis or post. That way you can have more area and more fruit production. Or in the same token, if you're not as tall and you don't want to be reaching up as high, you can shorten the height of your concrete post, or any post for that matter.
All right. Would it be feasible, because we got a couple questions last time, if you're building, if you're using that tire setup, because the root structure is pretty shallow, to set something up where it's almost mobile, because as you go further north, the risk of frost is of course higher. And would it then be possible to build something that you could maybe put on a dolly, and when you know the frost is coming in, you can bring it into a garage or a structure?
Oh yes, that would be no problem at all. The only thing there that you would have to do is you would need to keep it pruned down to a size where you're able to move it without it growing to its fullest maturity size. And you would probably be pruning it to maybe 4 or 5 leaves instead of, you know, 15, 20, or 30 leaves. Yeah, that's doable.
Interesting. So shout out to Annalise, who came up with that idea. If you have follow-up questions, again, if it's on dragon fruit or any variety of things for Cruz and for Juan, these are experts. These are locally, state, and almost nationally recognized experts on these subjects. And because growing in the Valley is it's a unique circumstance, make sure that you follow up with these experts, with these professionals. That's what they're here for, is to help people out, and that's what we really love to do. So just a reminder, we're gonna wrap up pretty soon. If we hope we have a few more questions to get through, but again, these presentations have been brought to you by UTRGV Center for Sustainable Agriculture and Rural Advancement, and some of our sponsored projects, the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Project and Texas Rural Cooperative Center. We will be holding another training series in probably a month or so. We're going to try to probably space it out every 30 days or maybe 45 days, maybe a little bit longer. Before we end here, some final question from Debbie Cox for Cruz. you were talking about making sure that you're acting quickly. Once you're adding water to the Quikrete, that you're acting quickly. What's the approximate window that we're talking about? Like, when do you need to make sure that you have all the concrete in there and that all the bubbles are tapped out and you've sort of evened out the top of it? Like, how much time are we talking about?
That's all gonna depend really on the actual concrete mix that you get. Some of it is really, really quick drying. Some of it is slow drying. But the one that I used was sort of like in between. Actually, I was spending 15 to 20 minutes in between times, and the consistency of the concrete mix made no difference whatsoever. So once again, if you've never worked with concrete, it may be a problem, but if you work with it, sometimes you're able to add just a little bit more water, so the consistency, you're able to work with it. That's why I tend to pour a little bit more water than I have to. That way it doesn't get hard on me, and then just leave it longer for it to cure. But it just all depends on the brand of the concrete mix, and the package will say whether it's fast drying or not.
Okay. But I think that tip to add a little bit more water, that seems like a generally good idea. That gives you a little bit more flexibility or wiggle room there. Another question from Debbie Cox. What's the approximate cost? I know you basically have to spread these costs over. A bag of concrete is going to be, maybe a few posts. What's the approximate cost would you estimate for one of these trellis posts?
You would have to purchase the 2x4s, the 2x8s, of course the concrete, some of the wire and stuff like. If you were to purchase all that and not the tools, your shovel, your wire cutters, and just the materials, more or less it's about $50 per pole. That's if you're using the Maximizer. The Maximizer is kind of expensive. I believe it'll run like $8 or $9, but if you buy quite a few bags, anywhere you purchase, they'll give you the contractor price, and it lowers the price. So all depending how much concrete you purchase also makes a difference in price.
Right.
But you're not going to go over $50 per post. If you're doing a whole bunch of them, of course, it's the dollar amount is not going to be relative to if you're doing one or you're doing 40, because you're using the same form for all the 40 posts. So
you're spreading those costs of the actual mold across 40 posts instead of just one.
Then I mean my average came out, I believe, was like I think it was like $17 a post, $17. Okay. But I did 45. So.
And then just sort of thinking about, what are the trade-offs here? There's the cost aspect of this, and then there's the sort of people are either going to be eating all this dragon fruit or going to be selling it. What, like a fully mature, productive plant that you've grown, and you're good at this. How, what type of yield are we talking about in terms of, I don't know if it's pounds or individual pitaya that are actually coming off of it per growing season?
My 40-foot row right now, which is probably 5 years old. 40 foot produces at one time probably 100 dragon fruit, and not all of them make it all the way through. And it'll start producing in July. It'll go all the way up to probably November. So it does like you have 3 good pickings off of it. So but that all depends on how much you water it, how well you take care of it, the amendment you put in. It's just like everything else. I could produce a ton of it, and then somebody else just produces half a ton. So
right. And that's, again, another reason to follow up with crews, to make sure that you're following best practices to maximize the sort of yield and the quality of the fruit that's coming off of these plants. I think we had questions last time again about some people that have grown this in the past that they weren't being pollinated appropriately, and what are different strategies to deal with that. So I just really want to thank everyone who's shown up for this. We've had a really good turnout and really good feedback and interaction, and we really value your time, and just want to thank you so much for coming out. And also want to really thank our ag experts, Cruz Salinas, Juan Regosa. They're fantastic. They're fantastic technical assistance providers here at the university, and please take advantage of their availability to answer questions on this. So Cruz and Juan, I just want to say thanks. And for everyone, seems like we have a really local audience here. So everyone here in the Valley, thanks for tuning in, and everyone stay safe out there. And we hope to see you next time.